Okay, friends, let's continue our journey. The last tutorial, what we did actually is we put our application into a container. Also, we created a second container, which is for MS SQL Server, and the application was working. Actually, also can be called a service. We have right now STS Security Token Service, as far as I remember. Okay, let's start Visual Studio. Start our project, open our solution, quick start SLN. As far as I remember, this was the one we were working on. And what we are gonna do is we are gonna put the rest of the services into containers. As I like to say, containers and microservices are much made in heaven. Okay. Let me see Docker. Okay. Container is still not, the containers are still not running. Yeah, they are running already. Docker image ls. We have one image, which is our first ID server, and after that ASP.NET identity. This is our service or our application. In the solution, Docker volume ls. Okay, we still have these volumes, which persist the data from the MS SQL server, and Docker network ls. Here we go. We have this network, Docker inspect, and we'll see the IP addresses of our application and of our MS SQL server. Docker compose, app settings JSON. This is the application we were working on. This is gonna be our STS security token service. And we successfully put this into a container, this application into a container. And we are spinning a second container in Docker Compose. As you can see, this is a second service, DB, database. We should be call it something different because we will have a lot of databases, but for now, let's keep it as it is. And since we have all the data which is necessary to continue, I'm not showing any links, so let's try and see, can we continue from there? Okay, Docker Compose. Now, let me run the application so I'm sure that everything works properly. Okay. Now, we expect actually to access our application on localhost 5001 because port 443 actually it's exposed. Here we go. In the Docker Compose override YAML file, we have declared that we want port 443 to be exposed externally outside of the Docker network. I'm talking about this network. So our service will be exposed on port 5001, and we can reach it by typing localhost 5001. Let me try and see. Localhost 5001. Okay, so far so good. We can register or we can even log in. Right now I'm gonna log in. Yeah, wrong password. Pass123 $. Password should be persisted and everything should be persisted. So I'm in. Here we go. No thanks. Look at this. I'm logged in as Stoyan Chereshar of Gmail. I'll log out. Yes, log out from identity server. Account logout. and go to the home page or landing page. Now, let's continue. Let me first check if I'm recording. Probably yes. I'm gonna stop the application right now and do the necessary steps. So we will put one of our clients, another application, into a container. We'll need only one container because none of our client application and the resources are using databases. We will add the databases, of course, later, but right now, MVC client is one which is using the services of our STS security token service, is using this service, in fact, because this is our main security token service right now. Identity server 4 plus ASP.NET identity. This is what we have in this application. Just want to mention that this guy from Identity Server 4 actually have a NuGet package, which is called exactly like that. ASP.NET Identity. They have another NuGet package which is called Entity Framework, which adds Entity Framework support. But in any case, we went already this road and we saw everything. So now, we want MVC client now to use the services of first serve blah blah whatever. We had this before. Actually, MVC client was running on port 5002, localhost 5002, and when you try to access, it immediately redirects you to localhost 5001, to this service, which is STS, and after we log in, we have been redirected back to our client. Now, let's try to put MVC client into a container. We know how to do that. In order to add MVC client to the Docker container, let me check first if we have something which we didn't commit. Okay, so in order to do that, all we have to do is click with the right mouse button and add a Docker file. Of course, in the Microsoft world, especially in Visual Studio Prime, much more is done. We saw already that launch settings will be changed. We saw that also the C# prosh file will be changed. So let me open this C# prosh file and look at this file. MVC client C# prosh file, and we will see what is going to be added. And launch settings, here we expect another change, and if this was another technology, a simply Docker file is going to be added. Okay, so let me add now the Docker support. I will say that I want this to be a Linux container. And voila. We saw that something changed here. Here we go. In MVC client. As far as I see, actually, these two lines have been added to cproch file. And here we have this code snippet which has been added to launch settings. And of course, the Docker file. Docker file looks exactly the same, slightly differences, of course. The paths to the cproch files are different, but it looks exactly the same like the Docker file which we have for our STS service, security token service. This Docker file. If we compare them, you almost won't see the difference. Look at this. Only the paths, only the directories have been changed here. This is the first service, and I'm gonna close it right now. So what happens is we're using the SDK and the runtime Buster. This is the name of a Debian distribution, so I bet that Microsoft is using a Debian probably as a base for their images. I have to check that. It's unconfirmed, but I will check, and if I'm wrong, I will let you know. If not, I'm not gonna say anything. So Buster Slim as base, what happens is we already know what happens. SDK, which is a bigger image, is used to build the application. After that, it's put into the container where we have only the runtime. Okay, that's it. Now, we are it already. We can even run it if we like, this application, but I'm not gonna do it right now. So these three files, we observed already these three files, so I'm gonna say adding Docker support for MVC client project. Okay. Now we need orchestration. We have nothing to look at here. I bet that the code generator of Visual Studio Prime actually did everything right. So it could be optimized, always could be optimized somehow. Right now I cannot think of, but yeah, always can be optimized in a way. Let me keep them open actually. Launch and Docker file. I'll keep them open because I want to see the differences. Now, this MVC client actually is not reflected here. This service or application MVC client, in fact, should run in a Docker container. But when I run the application with Docker Compose, it's not going to be run. So I want to be a part of this orchestration scenario. So that's why all we have to do is click with the right mouse button. Look at here. Let me look at the Docker Compose and Docker Compose override because there will be changes here. Click with the right mouse button and say add container orchestration support. Now we want Docker Compose. For now, we're gonna use Kubernetes as well, but for now, for the local development, for this phase of the DevOps, we're gonna use Docker Compose. I'm gonna click OK. It asks me what type Docker support options, target OS, Linux. We're gonna work with Linux, and I'm gonna click OK. And look at this. MVC client service has been added to Docker Compose. Is that simple? Otherwise, you can do it manually as well. It tells you the image, and I bet the image is already built based on the Docker file, on this Docker file, which is here into the application. Docker Compose actually shows you what Docker file is going to be used when the image is built. So done, done, done. We have 3 times done. So I expect that the image has been built and the container is spinning, is running right now. So Docker PS, Microsoft made it very, very simple actually. It's almost, how to say that? What is the right word in this case? Made for idiots. Underestimate us too much. Okay, I don't like that. First, this is our STS service. After that, we have the database for this service, and right now we have MVC client. MVC client right now it's not using any database, so it's supposed to work. We'll see what kind of troubles we're gonna face and solve these issues. Docker Compose, let me see here what is going on. Look, volumes has been pushed down, and here the MVC client has been inserted. Notice something, app data. This is something very important. Let's take a look at this. App data is an environment variable, and it says Microsoft user secrets This is the directory where the secrets are kept and the HTTPS certificates, I believe. So let's take a look at that. File Explorer. Now, what is the content of app data? I tried with PowerShell in one of the previous videos and I didn't have success, so let me go directly to the command prompt and use something which is gonna show me the content of this variable. Here we go. So update actually is in C users user update roaming. Okay, I'm gonna copy this. Now go to my file explorer and go there. Okay. Roaming. And now, actually, I don't like that. Let me start from the beginning. C users user, and here what do we have here? App data, it's a hidden folder. Application data is supposed to be hidden. Yeah, here we go. It's dimmed, like a little bit dimmed. Roaming, and here we have to look at for Microsoft. Let me check again. Roaming, yeah. Microsoft user secrets. Microsoft user secrets. And here we go. I bet those are the GUIDs of the applications. So why don't we look at actually the ID of this application? Shall we waste our time doing that? Launch MVC client. Let me look at the identifier 69. Let's look if we do have something like that. We don't. I'm not gonna spend too much time. Maybe it's for the entire solution, so the solution also probably has identifier, but I don't see here right now in the MVC client, I don't see such identifier. User secret ID. Let me look at briefly here. Okay, who knows where it is, but in any case, let me open this one. With SendGrid user, blah blah blah. Yeah, obviously it's not this one. Secret. But this is the way how you can explore Castro certificate password. Okay, go figure. And here we have another one. Yeah, so I bet this one is for MVC client for this application. Because in our identity server, in our first ASP, we have Kestrel, but not only Kestrel, we have also SendGrid. And SendGrid we saw in other two results. Okay, anyway, so user secrets identifier. I don't see it. I haven't seen. Okay, so this is the way we can figure out what is it. Let's look at in another folder. Let's look at in another folder to see what we are looking for. Launch settings, environment Docker file. What was another folder? This is the main thing right now. Update roaming Microsoft. Docker compose. Here we go. ASP.NET. HTTPS room ASP.NET. Okay, let's look at what do we have there. Okay, so let's go back to the roaming. Here we go to ASP.NET, HTTPS, and MVC client, PFX. Actually, those are binary files, so if I open with text editor, we are not gonna see anything, but those are certificates, I believe, and we can face problems with that, so I'll leave it as it is right now. So this is what it is. And as you can see, we have here what? We don't have a volume binds here. We have volume mounts. We have a bind. So we are somehow connected. We are coupled with the file system on which is running right now my application. Okay, so we'll see if we move this project to another computer, what's gonna happen. This is quite interesting, but as you can see, we have coupling here. These things are not in the volumes, which can be shared with NFS or network attached storage, NAS, or network storage area network. This is what is used in the data centers. Some kind of network attached storages to store the volumes, and after that from each node those volumes are accessible. So if Kubernetes, for example, moves the Docker container to another node, the node always can find the volume because it's on the shared device. Anyway, in the network, NAS and SAN, storage area network and network attached storage. Okay, so as you can see, MVC client declarations have been inserted here in the Docker Compose. And let me try something. This should be on port 5002 exposed outside. So we will be able to access and see what's going on. Now what I expect to happen right now is gonna run the container again, but this time it's gonna map port 443 to 5002. Let me check again. Still not done. Still not done. We'll see, we'll see. Okay. So this is what I want. 5002 on localhost. Done. This is done. Check again. Let me check for the images. ImageLS. Now we have two images. One is for MVC client service, another one is for our STS service or identity server 4. Okay, these two services are running and they use, actually MVC client is using our STS service. Let me try again and see the Docker containers. Now everything looks fine. And if you remember, or if you watch the previous tutorials, you will see that when I run actually the application and try to go to localhost 5002, access the website on 5002, I automatically get redirected to 5001. But Docker has a different vision on that. This is the Docker network. Let's represent it with this circle. And internally, we have two different ports, two different IP addresses. Each container is running on its own virtual machine with its own IP address. So right now, localhost is irrelevant. Of course, now on MVC service, MVC service needs to know where to redirect the user, and this definitely is not localhost 5001, but let's try that. Let me show networks, network ls, and let's see the IP addresses. This is very important. So I'll say docker inspect. Okay, So those are the IP address. MVC client actually has 4. Here we go. MVC client 192.168.84. This one has 192.168.82, and this one, which is the another service, is 103. Okay. As you can see, the IP address is changed. How can we make it work now? First, let's try to run it and see if everything works. Let's close this. We don't need it anymore. Yeah, we don't need this anymore. So Docker Compose. Let's run it. So all the services will be accessible. As I said, it's a little bit strange to me. I have to go deeper into this rabbit hole. Even though the containers are running, I cannot access the applications inside. But look at here how convenient everything is represented. So these 2 services are shown. And also the third one, which is MS SQL Server, it serves the STS service. Okay, so we have 2 services running right now. One of them is the client is using the services of this service first ID serve ISP net identity. Okay, how can I access it? 5001, it's working, no doubt about that. We can log in, we can do whatever we like. But now, from the previous tutorials, as I said, if I try to go to 5002 on the local host, I should be redirected to localhost 5001, which I suspect is not going to happen right now. And voila, we're expecting this error. An unhandled exception occurred while processing the request. Socket exception cannot assign requested address. It's absolutely clear. Actually, our service, MVC client actually, cannot redirect the user to STS, to security token service. Okay, so what we can do and what we shall do right now. We saw the IP addresses and everything. One thing which we can do actually is copy the IP address of our service and put it in the middleware, request pipeline middleware of our service. Let's stop it. It's not going to work. That's obvious. Now let's look at our startup. Where we are redirecting right now. Let's see. Look at this. To localhost 5001. This obviously is not working. Docker is running its own DNS server internally probably, and the localhost 5001 is not the proper address of our service. So we know the IP address, but nobody guarantees actually that the next time when we run Docker Compose, the same IP address is going to be assigned to our STS service. So what is the other thing we can do? Actually, in Docker, how you refer to a given service is by its host name. So, well, what we can do is, I'm gonna copy this, of course. Let me, I'm not gonna remove anything. Now, what's the name of this service? Let's go back to our Docker Compose and see the name of the service. Okay, mamma mia. Docker Compose YAML. So those are the services we have, and those are the names, the host names of the servers. So we have one server, virtual server or Docker container running, and its host name is first ID blah 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 blah. So we can access it in the Docker network by its host name, MVC client. So let me try to do that. So all the services can access each other by using their host names. And if you remember, I just want to point another thing. If you remember, this is actually how our service STS accesses the database by hostname. Look at this. So I'm going to close this. Okay, so in other words, what we can do actually is we can try to put here, and do we need 5001? Actually, we don't, because 443 is a standard port in the Docker network, is a standard port for SSL, for security socket layer. So I don't even need to put 5001. Internally, 443, port 443 on first ID, blah, blah, on this service, internally is going to be exposed on 443. Externally is exposed on localhost 5001. We got to figure out something here. We got to figure out how we can do that. So let's try to run again. Again, go to localhost 5002 to see what happens. To see what kind of an error we're going to get. Docker compose. Okay, so the two services are running. The database container is running as well. So now let me just refresh. Okay, and unhandled exception occurred while processing the request. But look at this. Now the message is different. Authentication exception. The remote certificate is invalid according to the validation procedure. So our MVC client actually is validating the certificate of our STS, security token service. And since we don't have a proper SSL certificate, we are not gonna be able to access it. Our MVC client refuses to communicate with it. But now, at least it can find the service, it can communicate, just the validation doesn't pass. Okay, the validation fails. HTTP request, the SSL connection could not be established. See inner exception. What we can do right now to solve this issue, I'm asking myself, do I need MVC client to use SSL certificate to communicate with the service? Actually, no. Actually, no. And why we are getting this error? Simply because the SSL certificate is issued for the given IP address, which is obviously changed right now in Docker network, or domain name. Actually, they issued for the domain name. And since we changed that, we have no chance actually to work. So this is one of the possible ways to fix this, is just make the communication unencrypted. Use port 80 instead of 443 and don't use security socket layer. In this case, we won't need certificates to allow the two services to communicate, STS with MVC client. Okay, so we may do that. We'll see what we're gonna do. Let's stop this. I'm very curious. I'm extremely curious actually. What's gonna happen if right now I don't require secure communication, and I can enforce this by removing this S, which means don't use actually security socket layer. Just access the service on port 80. It's not port 80, I will repeat, is not externally available, but it should be available internally for the Docker network. Okay, let me try again. I'm just curious right now. We are experimenting. If not, if this doesn't work for some reason, if JWT cannot be issued, if the communication is not secure, then we are in trouble, actually bigger trouble. We have to figure out a way to generate certificates, development certificates, for the client and for the server, and we'll see how that's done. Actually, this is fun. We'll learn something. Okay, but let's just try and see what happens here. As far as I remember, we didn't close port 80 actually on the STS. In other words, we're okay. Docker compose. We'll see how we're gonna solve this issue. And all these services, not only the MVC client, but all these services should be containers eventually. Not all of them. I'm not gonna put all of them because, for example, the project identity server and identity server, yeah, only identity server, and this one, first ASP.NET identity server, we don't need this project, so I don't care about them. I really can remove them from the solution, but I'm gonna keep them because, as you can see, sometimes I'm going back. But these projects we don't need, we don't use them, so we probably won't put them into containers. Okay, let me try and see now what's gonna happen. Invalid operation exception, a metadata address or authority must use HTTPS unless disabled for development by setting. Oh, look at this, it's giving us the hint. How can we solve this issue? Invalid operation exception, the metadata address for authority must use HTTPS unless disabled for development by setting require HTTPS metadata false. The main question is, where do we have to set this required HTTPS metadata false? But we gotta fix this. We're gonna fix that. Microsoft ASP.NET Core authentication open connection OpenID Connect, so probably is an option here in the OpenID Connect. Okay, so that's a very nice clue. Very nice clue. We're getting close. We are getting very, very close. Okay. I'm gonna stop the application and we will continue when we got this done. Okay. Okay, as I said, so let me run it again. Go to 5000, see the error, and follow the suggestions in exception. Okay, so that's it. I hope that works already. So localhost 5002. Invalid operation exception. The metadata address for authority must use HTTPS unless disabled for development by setting required HTTP metadata equals false. Okay. Look at the stack, the trace stack. Microsoft ASP.NET Core Authentication, OpenID Connect, OpenID Connect post configuration options, post configure string name, blah blah. Okay. Where is the configuration of the OpenID Connect? To me, it's clear here. So it should be somewhere in the options here. Options, click here, and let's see request. Here we go. HTTPS metadata equals false, and we are done. Okay. Now we're gonna get error probably, but different kind of error. We have to figure this out. We have to figure out how the heck we are gonna use MVC client and at the same time work in the network of Docker, in the Docker's network. Okay. Require options, require metadata. Change made in project MVC will not be applied while the application is running. Yeah, of course. To stop it. Now it looks normal to me. And what we have to do now, it's run the application again and see what kind of error we are gonna get, and step by step we'll solve the issue. Options, metadata. Okay, now let's go and try again. We'll draw conclusions when we see what's happening. Do we have to change something? No, because by convention, the feedback or the return URL is gonna be sent by the client who is trying to use the STS. So in the STS, I don't have to do anything. Okay, the feedback address. Okay, let me refresh now and see what happens. Okay, we got error, but look at this. This is the URL where we have been redirected. Okay, of course, it's not available here outside of Docker, but inside of a Docker container network, this should be okay. Instead of this one, we can say localhost 5002. This is SSL. This localhost page can be found. Reload error 404. Okay, let me remove S and see what happens. This page isn't working. Error empty response. Reload is gonna be the same. But the most important, we made a step forward. Okay,